If you possess a powerful sixth sense, you'd better be mentally prepared when going to the hospital. You might very well be besieged by terrifying shadowy figures. Welcome to the supernatural ghost story, the plastic surgery ghost. As everyone knows, animals have a much stronger ability than humans to sense impending disasters. In fact, besides the usual senses of touch, smell, taste, hearing, and sight, humans also possess a mysterious sixth sense, also known as intuition. For example, when you're walking alone at night, you often feel as if there's a shadowless figure following behind you. But my best friend can actually see what that person looks like. At first, she strongly rejected these visions, until something terrifying happened when she was dumped by her boyfriend and decided to get plastic surgery. She spent a long time searching online, and finally found a plastic surgery clinic that seemed to be extremely popular. When she went there, she saw that it was indeed bustling with people, all seemingly there for cosmetic procedures. The hospital was quite large, the prices were reasonable, and the service was even more enthusiastic by comparison. Just thinking about how she would soon transform from an ugly duckling into a swan, Li Sanping couldn't help but feel overjoyed. The cosmetic consultant handed her a mirror and said, "Take a look, this is the real you." The consultant pointed at Li Sanping's extremely unattractive reflection in the mirror and said gravely. Then, she suggested that he would need surgery on his entire face. While Li Sanping was still hesitating, the consultant took out several photos of successful cosmetic surgery cases, showing him the dramatic difference between the before and after. Those photos were indeed tempting, but in a few of them, the faces of the people after surgery were shrouded in a layer of black mist, making them impossible to see clearly. He knew it was his own unusual vision at work again. Seeing that he was about to back out, the consultant immediately offered him the lowest possible price. Li Sanping did not succumb to the temptation and finally paid the fee and signed the contract. After he paid, the previously enthusiastic beauty consultant no longer had any reason to be friendly, and then introduced him to a plastic surgery specialist in a cold tone. Behind the seemingly kind specialist, there was actually an extra shadowy figure. This kind of situation was nothing unusual for Li Sanping. However, when the specialist was drawing lines on his face in preparation for the surgery, he suddenly discovered that a shadowy figure had also appeared behind himself. When he turned around to look, the shadow was gone. The specialist told him that what he saw was just a reflection in the glass behind him. Then, speaking eloquently, specialist persuaded Li Sanping to change clothes and enter the operating room. There was no air conditioning in the room, yet it was chilling to the bone, and it seemed as if a pair of eyes was watching him through the crack in the door. The specialist told him to lie down on the operating table and prepared to inject him with anesthesia. As soon as the injection was given, Li Sanping started to react. Not only did his head feel dizzy and swollen, but the surroundings also began to change strangely. A shadowy figure crouched behind the specialist suddenly became crystal clear. It was an extremely terrifying woman.
Her figure wasn't exactly fat, but her face was alarmingly swollen. Upon closer inspection, there were even traces of surgical scars, as if her appearance was the result of a failed operation. However, there were many other figures with similar appearances. Some had sunken chests, while others had faces resembling cauliflower. More and more bizarrely shaped figures crowded around the operating table, frightening Li Sanping so much that he immediately jumped up from the table and, wailing like a ghost, fled the operating room. As he ran away, he caught glimpses of those terrifying figures everywhere out of the corner of his eye. When he finally, out of breath, found the cosmetic consultant to request a refund, the consultant immediately produced the contract, saying that Li Sanping had to accept his bad luck. In the end, he only received a small portion of the refund. Sometime later, that cosmetic clinic made the headlines. A young woman had written a suicide note before taking her own life, stating that she had lost the will to live after a failed cosmetic surgery at that hospital, and ultimately died by suicide. The suicide note was published online, immediately sparking heated discussion among curious netizens. In the end, the cosmetic clinic was shut down by the relevant authorities. As for Li Sanping, perhaps the terrifying vengeful spirits he saw surrounding the operating table that day couldn't bear to see anyone else suffer as they had, and deliberately scared him away. If that's really the case, then seeing those things wasn't such a bad thing for Li Sanping after all.